Hey people, it's me Tristan, and in this video I will talk to you about cavalry in the game of Muskets and Tomahawks. Your main battles will probably take place in a densely wooded area or something like if not a forest, then definitely something of this nature, as you see on this board here, where the British are just marching towards their lovely fort, but they might be ambushed by some French and Indian troops. As you can see, this is rather dense, and even for infantry it will be difficult to move, especially for the regular troops to form like firing lines and whatnot. So you might imagine that cavalry formations would be really difficult to form up here. Even though cavalry was present in the French and Indian War, it did not play that big of a role. One of the main reasons behind that, the North American landscape was very different from the one in Europe, where the land was covered with large fields and farmlands, and there were roads and ways and plains and everything like that. Very easy for cavalry units to move around, but in the woodlands of North America there were small roads, a lot of forest, which definitely hinders the movement of the cavalry. Also, cavalry units need a lot of maintenance as well, like their own special food and caretakers and whatnot. So in the skirmishes of the woodland areas, they weren't that useful. Even though all of the warring parties used them, they used them mainly for scouting or delivering messages. But that doesn't mean you couldn't use cavalry in Muskets and Tomahawks. The rules are there, the units are there, but they might not be that effective as you think they would. Other than that, the cavalry is actually pretty much like normal infantry, except that they move faster, and also they will be quite strong when you get a good charge in, but once again, in order to get your charge bonus, you cannot move into difficult terrain. What you want to do is have a clear charge over open terrain. The cavalry for the different factions is actually quite similar, with some exceptions in upgrading them. For example, French get to have lances, and the British can upgrade their cavalry to be elite. The Hanoverians and the natives don't have a cavalry option. All of the leaders or officers can be mounted on a horse. So for example, let's take the British cavalry. What cavalry does is, it's a trait that gives you movement of 8 inches, which is a lot compared to the 4 of normal troops. If you're on a road or on a field or something, you might move 8 inches, but whenever you get to difficult terrain or very hard terrain, you'll get severe penalties. You can make a huge cavalry force when your opponent is skirmishers and they hide themselves in the forest or in the fields or in rough terrain. You'll have a hard time getting to them. But because of that, this game also offers the opportunity to dismount. Let's say our officer is marching here, but they fall into the ambush. Well, one main thing about cavalry is puts you above other miniatures. It gives the opponent aiming bonus, so +1 to hit a mounted miniature, and you don't want to lose your officer. So once the ambush begins, the British officer can spend 1 action to dismount. He dismounts and is now able to command his force on foot and without giving any bonus the opponent of shooting him, which is definitely a good thing. So here's an example. The British column is marching down the road towards the farmland, towards their fort, and when suddenly they're ambushed by some native skirmishers, and it's time for the cavalry unit to activate. Well, the cavalry is actually within 8 inches of the ambushing unit, as cavalry deducts 5 when entering difficult terrain and 7 when entering very difficult terrain. They will actually only reach half of the field here with that penalty. So the natives can take another shot or just run into the forest and hide. And another thing is that cavalry will lose charge benefits if it moves into difficult terrain or into some terrain area. So in this case, the cavalry would try to charge in, but they would get stuck in the middle of the field and get shot. So cavalry in this scenario would be really hard to use. What I use cavalry for is support role, and I usually like to put my commander on a horse, because he could move around and support different units, or even charge in when the moment is dire, or he can jump off the horse if need be. Same with the cavalry. So let's take a look at another moment where cavalry could be really useful in the support role. So in this case, there are some French and Indian defenders behind the wall and the field, so they're quite well defended and in cover. The British regulars are marching towards them to open fire, and in this case the cavalry is here in the support line. The British cavalry is irregular type, so they have 4 cards in the pack with 1 action each. There's no good way for the cavalry to come in. Of course there's this lane here, but still there's a wall and it counts as difficult, so they will lose their charge bonus, so it's quite silly for them to just charge in. What you could do here is take your cavalry and move them up towards this field with 1 action, then you can dismount them and go on a flanking mission. Or if there's enough space, you could go charge in with your cavalry while taking the main hit with your infantry. So cavalry in most cases would be a great force to flank something, or just move somewhere really quickly. But you've got to be careful. Even though you have 4 cards, there's only 1 action per card, so your cavalry is not that safe. So in order to keep them, you gotta be careful. When you're opposing some cavalry, the easiest way to get away from cavalry is just hide in terrain or behind some walls or go in a building. The cavalry will be quite useless against that. So in conclusion, I would say that when using cavalry, you have to mind the fact that they are slowed down by terrain quite a lot. They can be dismounted but not remounted, because once you dismount, the horses go away. They are easier to hit because of the large target. Unlike me, when you get cavalry for this game, I suggest you get the dismounted miniatures as well right away, because I didn't, and now I'm just waiting to get them. If you have any questions or suggestions about this video, or the cavalry, or muskets and tomahawks in general, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Other than that, I thank you for watching, keep it safe, and I will talk to you in the next one.